And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is August the 25th, the 237th day of this year. Just 128 days remain to the year's over with, and we'll be starting a new one. It's some interesting national holidays on this date. National Banana Split Day, National Park Service Founders Day, and National Kiss and Make Up Day. Certainly it's a unique set of holidays. And let us see, it's also National Whiskey Sour Day and National Secondhand Wardrobe Day. So among those, I'm sure there's something you can find to get behind. See what kind of stories we have in the news on this date. The Abdul Al Sayed battles Jesse Waters over billionaires and Sharia law in a tense interview. He's been, Al Sayed was grilled on past statements on Sharia law and white supremacy and his plan to tax the rich. Michigan Democratic Senate nominee Abdul El Sayed was grilled in an interview on Jesse Waters' primetime Monday on his progressive policy positions as he sparred over his high-stakes Senate race against former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers. Al Sayed was challenged over his stated adherence to Sharia law, which was recently criticized by Vice President Vance, as well as previous remarks in which he linked efforts to eliminate Sharia law to white supremacy. In a statement he made to host Jesse Waters, he said, "Nobody's trying to push Sharia law on anybody else, just like I hope nobody's trying to push canon law on anybody else, because we live in an America where you should have the freedom of your religion." He also said the word, Al Sayed, who said the word never, pushes faith on somebody else, argued that there's evidence proving Trump administration has targeted him because he's Muslim. He said there's statistical evidence that the president and the vice president like to target me simply as a function of my faith. Well, if you are anti-Christian, then I invite you to go to a country that is more to your liking. Democratic mayors blasted by DHS for hunting down property owners leasing to ICE, called it unhinged. Department of Homeland Security is calling out Boston Democratic Mayor Michelle Wu's unhinged efforts to dissuade business owners from leasing to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in the city, equating it to hunting down private property owners. After Boston banned ICE vehicles from using city-owned parking lots to stage operations, ICE issued a notice seeking to rent hundreds of parking spaces in the city for 5 years. In response, Wu, an outspoken opponent of President Trump's immigration enforcement agenda, issued an open letter to parking garage and lot owners throughout Boston, in which she revealed the city had submitted a Freedom of Information Act request for any local responses to ICE. DHS fired back in the next post, writing that these actions by Sanctuary Mayor Michelle Wu are unhinged. She knows she has no authority to block us from leasing private property. She has hung down property owners and threatening them for working with ICE because she'd rather intimidate law-abiding Bostonians than get criminal illegal aliens off the streets. I don't know why anybody would oppose the removal of criminals who are here illegally from our city streets, but there's a lot of elected officials who's made that the main part of their campaigns. Well, Prime Minister Mark Carney says Canada won't accept any U.S. negotiating stance. It treats it as a subsidiary. Canada set to announce the details of retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. on Tuesday after relations between the two countries deteriorate sharply on Monday. U.S. President Trump warned Canadian leaders on Monday to fall in line or face consequences far worse than existing tariffs, and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney accused the U.S. government of attempting to subordinate Canada. He said the U.S. imposed new 50% tariffs on Canadian goods such as wine and furniture and dairy products. Well, Carney said U.S. trade demands proved Washington wanted to destroy our major industries, including autos and steels and aluminum. U.S. President also threatened 50% tariffs on Canadian cars and trucks and auto parts and steel would rise to 50% beginning January 1st, 2027. It's going to continue, I think, to get worse until something is decided between the two countries. Well, the next NBA player tells Laura Ingraham why WNBA can't ban him. He said, "I identify as a woman." Former NBA center Inez Cantor Freedom joined Laura Ingraham on the Ingram angle on Monday to set the record straight after his chaotic courtside ejection from Sunday's Indiana Fever-Chicago Sky matchup. Freedom was escorted out of Wine Trust Arena late on the third quarter after Chicago Sky guard Natasha Cloud unleashed an explicit, profanity-laced tirade against him after simply celebrating a three-pointer by Fever guard Sophie Cunningham. Freedom, who sat baseline wearing a shirt defining woman as an adult human female, explained to Ingram that he attended purely out of love for basketball and backed Cunningham, an athlete who's faced relentless backlash for defending female sports. But after Freedom put his hands up following a made bucket, Cloud immediately confronted him with personal insults, mocking and screaming that Cunningham was not going to sleep with him. Freedom said, "I actually loved the game and enjoyed the game." But at that point, he got escorted out of the arena. Well, the more details that come to light about Jed York's arrest and the prostitution sting come to light and begs the question about the 49ers. The more details continue to pour in about the engaging in prostitution arrest charges and the subsequent conviction on lesser charges of San Francisco 49ers majority owner Jed York. York was arrested in his native Ohio on Sunday on one charge of engaging in prostitution and another charge of possessing criminal tools. And while the more salacious charge was downgraded to disorderly conduct in a plea deal with the prosecutor, it's an initial charge over which York was arrested and arraigned that sticks in the minds of fans, media, and everybody else. It's the embarrassing charge that raises eyebrows because York is reportedly worth $500 million, and the family fortune believed to hover about $8.5 billion, but he allegedly tried to enlist the services of a prostitute for a mere $140. His legal team immediately filed a motion to seal the court records. The motion, of course, was denied. So the details, not the original Outkick story, have since come to light through reporting. York responded to an advertisement on Sunday from what police say is a known prostitution website in Columbiana County, Ohio. Originally arranged to have sexual activity with a female in exchange for $140, according to police. Meeting with the prostitute was supposed to happen near the Wheat Hill Mobile Home Community, a trailer park in East Palestine, Ohio. In York, police had fallen for a police sting by the Mahoning Valley Human Trafficking Task Force, an NFL owner, and was intercepted by officers when he approached the trailer park. He was taken into custody by the East Palestine police. The mobile home park, by the way, claims it's a victim of circumstances. His Facebook account posted that park addresses were not being used in the sting operation, but that's where police happened to catch up to York. The news of this arrest in our quiet community is just as shocking to us as it is to the rest of you, the Post said. York was taken into custody when he was found in possession of a cell phone that was used to set up the alleged rendezvous with the person he allegedly believed to be a hooker. And the phone in York's possession was used to arrange the criminal act, according to court records. And the phone, he was also charged with and that phone was also what he was charged with possessing criminal tools. Well, Schiff attack on Trump's D.C. IndyCar race backfires after the driver points out a contradiction. Senator Adam Schiff's latest attack on President Trump was challenged by an IndyCar veteran who pushed back on the California Democrats' charge the commander-in-chief was wasting taxpayer funds for his own self-aggrandization. Schiff criticized Trump for ordering a Washington race by executive order and accused the president of using the motorsport spectacle to distract Americans from higher costs and policy failures. While you struggle with the cost of gas, Trump offers you the spectacle of an IndyCar race, hoping you'll not notice, Schiff said on Sunday. Or taxpayer money spent on self-aggrandizing distractions, and you get higher taxes and higher costs, he said. Although major automotive firm Penske said it bankrolled the event, not the president. Schiff posted the criticism on X alongside video of Trump waving the green flag as Fox Sports announcer Lee Diffie got the race underway. Race fans and other critics lambasted Schiff's comments, including IndyCar driver Graham Rollo, who reminded the California Democrat the race was privately funded and argued it benefited government coffers because thousands of spectators traveled to Washington and spent money. According to what Rahal said on X, no, Adam, he wanted you to notice and bask in the pride of being an American, watching great racing and patriotism on display. Well, Schiff's one of a group who, if Trump died tomorrow, would run out of things to complain about. Everything they say is designed around criticizing President Trump. And speaking of President Trump, he scored a Supreme Court win on a mail-in voting restrictions before the midterms. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court handed the Trump administration a victory on Monday, allowing it to enforce President Trump's election integrity executive order restricting mail-in voting ahead of the November midterms. High Court lifted an injunction that had blocked the order in 23 states. It challenged it after the administration appealed in July. The U.S. Postal Service and Justice Department said they would immediately implement the revised mail-in ballot restrictions after that ruling. Most importantly, the ruling clears the way for the U.S. Postal Service to check the distribution of mail-in ballots against a list of citizens maintained by the Department of Homeland Security. It's also a significant political victory for the Trump administration as it's advanced against the widespread use of mail-in voting, citing what it believes is a heightened vulnerability to tampering and voter fraud. Yes, I remember the discussion that was held about and I think it was a 2024 election. Over 1,000 people over the age of 120 voted Democrat. There's not that many living 120-year-olds in the country. More recently, Trump slammed what he called a suspiciously high volume of mail-in ballots cast for Cynthia Rahman in the 2026 LA mayoral race primaries. He said, they don't have voting booths. Everything's by mail. I don't think a Republican can win in California unless you pass the Save America Act, Trump told Fox News, referring to GOP legislation to narrow the scope of mail-in voting and voter ID requirements. They're just going to have to get rid of mail-in voting. And like many onlooking conservatives, Trump pointed out that after election night, the vast majority of Democratic votes had been for Nithya Raman, creating a delayed outpouring of support. Fox News Digital hadn't reviewed any particular case of election fraud tied to the LA mayoral race, but there's been a lot of stories about fraud. Well, North Carolina doctors accused of shooting two sisters in an alleged interstate road rage attack. North Carolina doctors arrested August 22nd after they allegedly fired into a Jeep during an interstate road rage incident, wounding two sisters aged 12 and 20, according to Virginia State Police. Dr. Richard Thomas Ravello, 61, of Charlotte, North Carolina, is driving north on Interstate 77 in his Mercedes-Benz about 8:50 a.m. when gunfire erupted about 3 miles north of the North Carolina-Virginia state line. State police said in a press release, Aravello fired into a moving Jeep, hitting both sisters in the legs. And both victims are airlifted to a hospital with injuries that weren't considered life-threatening, according to the police. Aravello then fled into the Mercedes-Benz, according to the police. Troopers spotted and stopped the Benz about 15 miles away and took him into custody. Faces several felony charges, including malicious shooting into an occupied vehicle, maliciously causing bodily harm to another with intent to harm, and maim, and use of a firearm, and committing a felony. He remains jailed without bond at a New River Valley Regional Jail. Officials said he's scheduled to appear in court September 29th. State police haven't said what led to the alleged road rage incident or whether investigators recovered a firearm from Aravello's Mercedes-Benz. The Jeep's driver is also cited for reckless driving, but authorities didn't identify the driver. Road rage is becoming more and more prevalent. Syria is off the U.S. terror list after nearly 50 years as President Trump administration clears investment hurdle. U.S. on Monday formally removed Syria from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. The move, Secretary of State Rubio said, eliminates the final major barriers to investment and economic recovery in that country. Rubio said in a statement he'd authorized a formal rescission after a mandatory 45-day congressional notification period ended. President Trump had initiated the countdown in July after confirming to Congress that Syria's government had ceased supporting acts of international terrorism. Rubio said Monday, I've also delisted the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's HTS designation as a specially designated global terrorist, Rubio said Monday. The actions, he said, represent another historic step by President Trump to give the Syrian people a path to prosperity. Well, it's Syria is said to be actively opposing the terror groups that call that country home. We'll see what happens. Well, Putin panicked as defiant Ukraine marks Independence Day under Russian bombardment. Ukraine marked its 35th Independence Day on Monday under the shadow of continued Russian attacks. One regional security expert argued that Russian President Putin is panicked as Ukrainian forces strike deeper into Russia. That anniversary commemorating Ukraine's August 24th, 1991 declaration of independence from the Soviet Union came amid intensified Russian strikes on civilian infrastructure and heightened security concerns after Ukraine's security service warned of possible terrorist attacks ahead of the holiday. European leaders joined Ukrainian President Zelensky in Kiev for Independence Day events and a show of support as the war grinds on. Zelensky declared Ukraine wants peace but is not prepared to surrender to Moscow's demands. As a Russia drone strike Monday on a packed shopping center in Kryvyi, Zelensky's hometown, killed at least 16 people and injured 130, according to the Associated Press. Putin has warned that Ukrainian strikes on Russian economic targets open a Pandora's box, while Kiev maintains deep strikes are vital to disrupting Moscow's logistics. Ukraine has targeted Russian economic infrastructure, including warehouses belonging to online retailers of Wildberry and Ozon. War with Russia has seen a lot of advances for Ukrainians over the year, according to former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Kerry Philpatty, now Executive Director of the Vandenberg Coalition. Recently been able to actually penetrate much deeper into Russian territory, including close to Moscow and St. Petersburg. Well, it would be nice to see that war wind down, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. Well, according to Bruce Pearl, conservatives are attacking the very college sports bill that protects women. Men do not belong in women's sports. They didn't complicate it, but some conservative influencers and interest groups are allowing it to become complicated through careless claims about legislation designed to protect college athletics. A number of folks who said they had spent decades coaching college basketball had something to say. They said they knew the difference between winning a possession and winning the game. Conservatives now face a similar choice. They can chase applause by attacking allies and mischaracterizing the bill, or they can unite around the facts and win the larger fight for women and fairness and future college sports. Well, Section 127 explicitly states that nothing in the bill will overrule, modify, or amend Title IX. It's the Protect College Sports Act. Some organizations and women's sports advocates claim it would gut Title IX or invalidate state laws that reserve women's teams for women. Well, the text says the opposite. It explicitly states nothing in the bill will modify, override, or amend Title IX. Female athletes would retain their current legal protections and ability to bring sex discrimination claims. Section 120 also protects athletes and employees and others from retaliation for reporting discrimination or participating in Title IX proceedings. If you can't figure out what a woman is, I invite you to go back to elementary school. Well, the Lindsay Clancy trial still making headlines. One veteran prosecutor says postpartum is real, but child killing demands accountability. While failure by people, medical professionals, and systems around Lindsay Clancy deserve scrutiny, nothing should erase a parent's responsibility for killing a child, according to a veteran prosecutor who said he's concerned that public support for the Massachusetts mother is overshadowing the killing of her 3 young children. She's accused of killing her 3 children, Cora 5, Dawson 3, and Kaylin 8 months, and trying to end her own life by jumping out a second-floor window after sending her husband to pick up takeout and something from a pharmacy, according to Plymouth County District Attorney's Office. But this case has drawn national attention. Clancy has also attracted supporters both online and in person at the courthouse, and experts have warned that support's taken attention away from the actual victims in the case. Well, let's talk about our topic for today. You know, there's been a lot of conspiracy theories that have come up over the years. Today we're going to talk about Princess Diana and the mysterious circumstances of her death. You know, there's still a lot of people who think it was outright murder. You know, Princess Diana's death was August 31st, 1997. In the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris, and remains an event that caused horror and deep sadness around the world. But as long as the mourning for the Princess of Hearts has persisted, there are persistent conspiracy theories claiming that her death wasn't an accident, but the result of a murder plot. Now, various theories have been developed, ranging from the involvement of the British monarchy, MI6, or the British Secret Service, to the role of the ambulance that transported her to the hospital after the accident. There are stories the accident stopped it on the side of the road and sat there for over an hour while the princess died. We're going to talk about some of the various conspiracy theories surrounding her death, and we're going to try to shed some light on the events and speculations surrounding the rescue transport. Now, she died in a car accident in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris. She's running from paparazzi with her then boyfriend Dodi Fayed and driver Andre Paul. The car, a Mercedes-Benz S280, raced into the tunnel at a speed of about 100 kilometers per hour and collided with a pillar. The driver, Andre Paul, and Dodi Fayed died at the scene for the accident. Diana succumbed to her serious injuries a few hours later in the hospital. Only the bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, survived but he did have serious injuries as well. Now, one of the most popular and controversial theories is that Princess Diana was murdered by the British royal family. or Prince Philip, the Queen's husband, or the British Secret Service MI6. That theory was spread by Mohammed al-Fayed, the father of Dodi Fayed. He said the British elite staged Diana's death because she was planning to marry Dodi. Been considered a scandal, despite since Dodi was a Muslim, that would made any children in line for the British throne. Now, some versions of the theory even go as far as to claim that Diana was pregnant at the time. The royal family wanted to prevent a Muslim half-brother from being among the royal offspring. Mohammed al-Fayed insisted that the royal family had a strong motive to eliminate Diana. He also referred to Diana's own letter in which she said she believed she might die in a planned car crash. He claimed MI6 arranged the accident by manipulating Henri Paul or even monitoring the tunnel. Now, Operation Paget, a comprehensive British investigation, concluded there was no evidence of murder or MI6 involvement. Similarly, the claim that Diana was pregnant couldn't be confirmed by medical reports. Now, according to one story, Diana was pregnant, planning a wedding with Dodi. An extension of that theory was that Princess Diana was pregnant, and the British monarchy and intelligence service viewed her relationship with Dodi Fayed as a threat to the monarchy. That theory is based on the assumption that such a marriage would have brought disrepute to the British crown. That theory is supported by Mohammed al-Fayed, who claimed that Diana told him about her pregnancy. He argued that this was the real reason for the alleged murder. Now, Princess Diana's autopsy didn't find any evidence she was pregnant. In addition, her closest confidants stated they had no knowledge of a planned wedding or pregnancy. One of the more mysterious theories claims that the security cameras in the tunnel were deliberately turned off or tampered with to cover up Diana's murder. That theory arose because there's no footage of the accident, even though there were cameras inside the tunnel. The conspiracy theorists have argued that there is a sign of a cover-up. The absence of footage that could document the accident is considered highly suspicious. The authorities explained the cameras in the tunnel were not installed for road traffic, but for monitoring the tunnel infrastructure and were not aimed at traffic at the time of the accident. And they said there was no accident of any tampering with the cameras. Now, one of the central conspiracy theories surrounding Princess Diana's death relates to the ambulance that transported her to the hospital after the accident. According to this theory, her rescue was deliberately delayed, and thus death was not prevented by the ambulance deliberately driving slowly to the hospital. According to critics, it took about an hour for Diana to be transported from the scene of the accident to the hospital, even though the hospital was only about 6 kilometers away. This delay is considered by conspiracy theorists to have been deliberately done to ensure that she could succumb to her injuries. Now, French emergency services follow a different medical practice than those in the UK and the US. In France, a seriously injured person is not transported until he or she has been stabilized at the scene of the accident. And according to official reports, Princess Diana was in critical condition and the team was doing everything they could to stabilize her. The slow transport was due to Diana's condition not being stable enough to move any faster. Despite the efforts of the medical team, she died because of severe internal blood loss and chest trauma. Extensive investigations, including the French inquiry and Operation Paget in the UK, concluded that Princess Diana's death was the result of a tragic accident caused by the driver's excessive speed, high levels of alcohol, and stress caused by the paparazzi. Now, it was known that Henri Paul had been drinking earlier, and he was not supposed to have been the driver, according to what I've read. Lord Stevens, who led the UK investigation, stated there was no evidence of conspiracy, murder, or deliberate delay in the rescue efforts. The theories surrounding the ambulance and transport delays are based on a misunderstanding of French practice of stabilizing seriously injured patients on the spot. Medical experts determined that Diana's injuries were so severe that she likely wouldn't have survived even if she'd been taken to the hospital quickly. Conspiracy theories about Diana's death persist decades after her death, but official investigations don't support the theory of a planned murder or deliberate delay. Instead, the facts show that Diana's death was a tragic result of several unfortunate circumstances. Speculation about the ambulance and the circumstances of its transport's emotionally charged, but offers no evidence of a conspiracy. The death of Princess Diana is not only a tragic event, but also a huge catalyst for speculation, especially in the tabloid press. Many newspapers and magazines reported sensationally about possible conspiracies, unsolved mysteries, and alleged cover-ups. We got some of the theories that took hold of the tabloid press, as well as specific incidents and reactions to the royal family. Now, it was reported that immediately after Diana's death, somebody went to the hospital to collect her jewelry. Speculation is swirled about why this happened and who this person might have been. Some conspiracy theories suggest this may have been part of a cover-up, possibly to remove personal items that could provide evidence of a conspiracy. Now, there's no solid evidence of such an incident. Such reports could be based on misunderstandings or on common practices of managing personal belongings after a death. The British royal family, especially Queen Elizabeth II, under some criticism after Diana's death. The tabloid press questioned why the royal family seemed to react so hesitantly and initially remained in Balmoral in Scotland instead of immediately returning to London. The family's hesitant public response was perceived by many as insensitive, leading to speculation the monarchy was somehow involved in Diana's death. The negative public perception eventually forced the Queen to make a rare public address expressing her grief and paying tribute to Diana, which many saw as an attempt by the royal family to salvage their public perception. Another aspect that received a lot of attention in the tabloid press was the claim that the lights in the Point de Alma tunnel may have been turned off or dimmed at the time of the accident. The idea behind this theory was that someone had deliberately caused or facilitated the accident by reducing visibility in the tunnel. Official investigation refuted this theory. There's no evidence that the lighting in the tunnel was turned off or tampered with at the time of the accident. The conditions in the tunnel are normal at the time, and the cause of the accident was attributed to other factors such as the speed of the car and the condition of the driver. Another aspect been addressed in the theories is whether the evidence was intentionally removed from the accident. Some claim both the paparazzi and the possibly unknown persons at the scene of the accident removed or tampered with evidence to cover up a conspiracy. These claims focused in particular on the fact that there are no surveillance camera recordings documenting the accident, which critics have argued indicates that evidence was intentionally moved or tampered with. Now, just as here, a lot of the main thoroughfares in Paris are monitored by security cameras, and the fact that there was no camera feed showing what happened in the tunnel was quite suspicious. Tabloid press had already played an ambivalent role during Diana's life, as it significantly promoted Diana's popularity, but also engaged in invasive reporting. The fact that paparazzi were following Diana on the night of the accident led to strong accusations they were complicit in her death. Some theories went as far as to claim the paparazzi weren't just there by chance, but deliberately and possibly instrumental and instructed by higher powers to harm Diana. In fact, there was a story of a motorcycle that tried to cut off the car Diana was riding in that was supposedly being driven by paparazzi. Well, the tabloid press has filled a lot of theories surrounding the death of Princess Diana through its sensational reporting. Although many of those theories have been refuted by official investigations, Diana's death remains a mystery for a lot of folks, fueled by emotional speculation and a desire for answers. While the key aspects, such as the alleged jewelry theft and the questions of the lights in the tunnel and reaction of the royal family, are interesting, they don't provide any solid evidence of a large-scale conspiracy. Official reports, both in France and the UK, concluded that Diana's death was a result of a tragic accident caused by excessive speed, the driver's condition, and being pursued by paparazzi. In public perception, it's described as in a certain fashion. Diana was more than just a public figure. She was a beacon of hope, compassion, and humanity. In a world often characterized by coldness and distance, she managed to build a deep connection with people through her warmth and empathy, regardless of their status or background. And she stood by the weakest. children, the homeless, the sick. People are often forgotten. Gave not only her time, but also her heart. She saw people not through the filter of privilege or prejudice, but with an open heart that drove her tireless commitment. In her role as mother to William and Harry, she embodied unconditional love and care. It's clear her children were her top priority. And despite the immense pressure of royal life, she always managed to break down the walls and show her vulnerability to people all over the world. She wasn't perfect by any means, but that's exactly what made her so infinitely human and lovable. Her death left a deep hole in the hearts of millions of people around the world. After her death, images of the sea of flowers in front of Kensington Palace and tears shed all over the world went around the world. She was revered by many as the Princess of Hearts. Her light may have gone out, but her legacy shines on in the hearts of those she inspired. Her legacy also lives on through her sons and the many charities she inspired. One of her sayings was, "Each of us has the potential to bring hope to another person," which is a nice saying. Well, from the purported murder of Diana, one that I've heard about for years, was the Titanic deliberately sunk? There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of books and TV specials about that. It was April 10th, 1912. The RMS Titanic, the largest, most luxurious ship of her time, left the port of Southampton, England, on her first voyage to the New York City. The ship was considered an enduring marvel, hailed as unsinkable due to its safety systems. But just 4 days later, on the night of April 14th, Titanic collided with an iceberg and sank a few hours later in the icy waters of the North Atlantic. Of the approximately 2,224 people on board, only 706 survived. Over 1,500 died. This tragic event is well documented. But since the night it happened, there have been numerous conspiracy theories that have circulated claiming the sinking was no accident. The Titanic was a technical masterpiece. The length was 269 meters, the width was 28 meters, and the height was 53 meters. It was the largest passenger ship in the world at that time. Had 9 decks, was able to accommodate 3,547 passengers and crew members. The furnishings were particularly impressive. Magnificent staircases, elegant dining rooms, spacious suites for the wealthy passengers, which in fact turned that ship into a floating palace. Titanic was divided into 3 classes. The first class consisted of the richest and most influential people of the time. In addition, the ship had state-of-the-art safety features, including watertight compartments and bulkheads that could be closed in the event of damage to keep the ship afloat. That was one of the reasons the Titanic was considered unsinkable. The Titanic's planned route took her from Southampton through Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, Ireland, to New York City. She was scheduled to arrive on April 17, 1912. But at about 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, the ship struck an iceberg. That collision caused cracks below the waterline that resulted in the ship filling with water. Despite initial confidence the Titanic would remain afloat, it quickly became apparent that ship was unsalvageable. It sank in about 2.5 hours. Lifeboats, only big enough and plentiful enough for about half the passengers, died in the icy waters of the North Atlantic because there weren't enough boats and warm clothing for everybody. The Titanic wasn't only known for its size and luxury, it was also known for the list of prominent passengers on board, especially among the first-class passengers. Among the most famous were John Jacob Astor IV, the wealthiest man on board and one of the richest people in the world. He died in that disaster while his pregnant wife, Marilyn Astor, survived. Isidore and Ida Strauss. Isidore was co-owner of the Macy's department store in New York. Both refused to get into a lifeboat because they wanted to stay together. It was women and children first, remember? So they did die together. Benjamin Guggenheim, the industrial magnate, known as one of the wealthiest families in America. Guggenheim changed into his evening wear after the collision, said he wanted to die like a gentleman. He didn't survive. J. Bruce Ismay, the managing director of the White Star Line, which operated the Titanic, he managed to get into a lifeboat and was later heavily criticized for his escape. He should have gone down with the ship, is what a lot of folks said. Some prominent passengers survived, including businessman J. Bruce Ismay, whose survival caused outrage among many. He was seen as the epitome of cowardice, as he should have remained in charge of the ship since he was the managing director. This gave further fuel to conspiracy theories who speculated Ismay may have known about the events that were going to happen. Well, of the 2,224 passengers and crew on board that night, only 706 survived. Survivors are mostly from the first two classes, as the lifeboats were filled with these passengers first. The 324 first-class passengers, 202 survived. The figures for third class were far worse. Of the 709 passengers, only 174 survived. Most of the surviving celebrities, of course, were from first class. Marilyn Astor, the pregnant wife of John Jacob Astor IV, was placed on one of the first lifeboats and survived. Another prominent example of the survival is the American millionaire and art patron Margaret Molly Brown. I later got the nickname the Unsinkable Molly Brown for her efforts in rescuing other passengers. Well, there has long been stories that there was an insurance conspiracy. And then the question became, was this actually the Titanic or its sister ship, the Olympic? One of the most popular conspiracy theories about the Titanic is that the sunken ship wasn't actually the Titanic, but its almost identical sister ship, the Olympic. This theory is based on the fact the Olympic was involved in a serious accident with the British warship HMS Hawke in 1911. In order to cover the losses, those responsible at the White Star Line are said to have swapped the ships and disguised the Titanic as the Olympic. According to this theory, the damaged Titanic is deliberately disguised as the Titanic and sent on its maiden voyage, where it was deliberately sunk in order to collect a large insurance sum. One argument for this theory is that the Olympic and the Titanic were virtually identical. Swapping the ships would have been relatively easy. White Star Line would have received financial protection in the form of insurance if the Titanic had sunk. Another popular theory revolves around the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. In 1910, 2 years before the Titanic disaster, some of the most powerful bankers and industrialists met on Jekyll Island to discuss the creation of the Federal Reserve. Among the passengers who died in the Titanic disaster, such as John Jacob Astor IV, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Straus, were among the richest men in the world who were reportedly vehemently opposed to the creation of the Federal Reserve. The theory is that the disaster was orchestrated to eliminate these influential men who stood in the way of the creation of the Federal Reserve. J.P. Morgan, the powerful American banker who himself helped create the Federal Reserve, had booked a suite on the Titanic and canceled his trip at the last minute. That's a detail conspiracy theorists considered quite important. Another detail that seems suspicious to theorists is the number of lifeboats on board the Titanic. It only had 20, enough for about half the passengers and crew. Critics of this decision argued that this wasn't an oversight, but part of a larger plan to ensure the ship would have maximum damage if it sank. That theory is often combined with insurance theories mentioned previously, which show that the sinking of the Titanic was intentionally caused under circumstances designed to kill as many people as possible. An even more adventurous theory is that the iceberg that damaged the Titanic was not an ordinary iceberg, but it was an intentionally placed iceberg. The idea an iceberg was deliberately directed into the ship's path to cause its sinking is highly speculative, but some conspiracy theorists consider it quite possible. They argued the accident seemed too perfect to have happened by chance. And despite the ongoing speculation and numerous theories, there's no hard evidence to suggest the sinking of the Titanic was deliberate. The official investigation concluded that human error and unfortunate circumstances led to the disaster. But as with many great tragedies, the gaps in the story and the mysterious coincidences provide plenty of room for conspiracy theories. Well, from the sinking of the Titanic, what's termed a biblical conspiracy theory. Has Noah's Ark been found? There's been stories in the news recently about that. There's been a number of mysterious expeditions that have gone to Ararat, and we've written a couple of books about it. One was called the Ararat Anomaly. For centuries, there have been theories and legends that say the remains of Noah's Ark can be found on Mount Ararat in Turkey. This biblical story in which Noah and his family were saved by a flood sent by God is one of the most well-known themes in the Bible. It continues to inspire theologians, historians, and adventurers to this day. While many view the story of the Ark as a religious myth, others believe it's real and exists somewhere on Mount Ararat, possibly hidden. The biblical story of Noah's Ark, described in Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, tells about a flood that came upon the earth to punish the sins of humankind. Noah was commissioned by God to build a large ark to save himself, his family, and the animals. And after the flood receded, it said to have become stranded in the mountains of Ararat. Now, the reference to the mountains of Ararat for generations of believers and researchers have identified the modern-day Mount Ararat in Turkey as the location of the ark. Reports of finds of the ark have been circulated since the early Middle Ages. Early chronicles and travel reports from the 4th century mentioned alleged sightings of the ark on Ararat. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus from the 1st century and the early Christian writer Eusebius from the 3rd century both claimed the remains of the ark were visible and accessible. But despite these reports, no early researcher was able to provide a conclusive evidence. In the 19th century, interest in the search for the ark increased. Missionaries and researchers reported on expeditions to the mountain without achieving any definitive results. A particularly prominent case was the British explorer James Bryce, who claimed to have found a large piece of wood on Ararat in 1876. Bryce claimed that this piece came from the ark, but later analysis showed the wood could not have come from the time of the flood. The 20th century brought a series of major expeditions, often well-funded and technologically equipped, but nonetheless failed to prove definitive evidence of the ark's existence. One of the most famous cases is the expedition of the French industrialist and explorer Fernand Navarre in 1953. He claimed to have found large pieces of wood at an altitude of 4,000 meters on Mount Ararat, which supposedly from the ark. And this find, which he brought to Europe as evidence, aroused interest worldwide, and many folks believed the ark had finally been found. However, scientific studies of the wood showed it was only a few hundred years old and didn't date from the time of Noah's flood. Critics have even accused Navarre of placing the wood there himself in order to make the expedition a success. His expedition is still controversial today and offers no clear evidence. Now, another significant expedition took place in 1989 was led by George Green and archaeologist Harold Williams. The team consisted of scientists and theologians and journalists who received support from private individuals and organizations from different countries. The expedition used the latest technology to systematically explore the mountain, including ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery. Despite this advanced equipment, the team was unable to find any remains of the ark. They encountered numerous geological formations interpreted by some as remains of the ark, but which, upon closer inspection, turned out to be natural rock formations. The team was eventually forced to retreat without definitive evidence that the ark existed. In addition to the logistical and technological challenges, some expeditions reported mystical or inexplicable occurrences that made the search for the ark even more difficult. These reports add to the myths and legends surrounding Mount Ararat and make the search for the ark seem like an almost supernatural undertaking. Many expeditions attempting to reach the summit of Mount Ararat reported unexplained weather phenomena. Even during the summer months, when the mountain is normally accessible, explorers have experienced sudden storms and thick fog and unpredictable drops in temperature have delayed or forced expeditions to be abandoned. Some believe that these weather events are more than just coincidence, and many have involved some sort of divine intervention. There have been, as I said earlier, a recent expedition that in fact is said to have found the ark. Some expedition members claimed to have seen strange lights or apparitions on the mountain they couldn't explain. There were reports of brightly glowing objects in the sky or on the mountain that had no obvious source. These expeditions and experiences the expeditions encountered helped to portray Mount Ararat as a mystical and mysterious place protected by a higher power. Now, some expeditions were accompanied by tragic events. In 1973, 2 members of an expedition died in a sudden rockfall. Other expeditions also reported accidents or injuries that were due to the dangerous steep climb. These incidents were interpreted by some as a sign the mountain and the ark would not be found. The popular theory is that the remains of the ark may already have been discovered and being kept secret for political or religious reasons. Turkish governments declare Mount Ararat and that region around it as a military restricted area, making expeditions even more difficult. Some conspiracy theorists suspect that the government's deliberately withholding information to avoid religious or political tensions, but this has never been confirmed by concrete evidence. Instead, Mount Ararat remains a region that is difficult to access, making expeditions and scientific research difficult. Others claim that major religious institutions, such as the Catholic Church, may suppress evidence of the ark's existence to avoid religious controversy or to avoid jeopardizing scientific consensus. However, these claims have never been proven and remain speculative. Most scientists consider the search for Mount Noah's Ark to be unlikely and question the historical existence of the ark. The Bible is considered a religious text based on symbolic and moral teachings rather than a historical document. From a scientific point of view, there's no evidence to support the idea of a global flood or the construction of such a large ark. The idea that their remains could have survived on Ararat for several thousand years is considered implausible by most archaeologists. Wooden structures would likely have rotted or been destroyed by natural forces over such a period of time, especially in such an exposed and harsh environment as the summit of Mount Ararat. Well, the legend of Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat continues to fascinate researchers, adventurers, and believers alike. Despite numerous expeditions and modern technology, no conclusive evidence of the ark's existence has yet been found. Theories that it's been found but is being kept secret for political or religious reasons are intriguing but unproven, of course. What makes the expedition even more mystical are the numerous reports of unexplained weather phenomena, mysterious apparitions, and tragic incidents that occurred during the search. These events add to the fascination and keep the myth of Noah's Ark and on Ararat alive. And whether the ark ever be found remains uncertain. What is certain, though, is that Mount Ararat and the search for the ark will continue to fascinate researchers and believers from all over the world and inspire new adventures. Well, we've got time for one more short story. One of the most famous names in the world is that of Marilyn Monroe, who died a number of years ago. She was only 36 at the time. She remains one of Hollywood's most fascinating and tragic icons. Her death was officially ruled a suicide by tranquilizer overdose, but numerous conspiracy theories claim there's much more behind the story. These theories range from alleged Kennedy involvement to speculation about intelligence agency influence. To understand the scope of these conspiracies, it's important to examine her life and career, her connections to the U.S. power elite, and various theories surrounding her death. Born Norma Jean Mortensen, June 1st, 1926 in Los Angeles. She grew up in difficult circumstances. Her mother was mentally ill, and she spent much of her childhood in foster homes and orphanages. First worked as a model before starting her career as an actress in Hollywood. With her dazzling looks and charm, she rose to become one of the biggest stars in the film industry in the 1950s. Her most famous films, including The 7-Year Itch in 55 and Some Like It Hot in 59, made her a symbol of seduction and glamorous beyond belief. But behind the glamour is a deeply vulnerable woman who suffered from personal insecurities and mental health issues. She struggled with depression throughout her life and had a series of turbulent relationships, including marriages to baseball player Joe DiMaggio and writer Arthur Miller. Her undeniable talent as an actress and her iconic beauty brought her worldwide fame, but she longed for more recognition just as a sex symbol. Her pursuit of serious roles in a male-dominated industry, as well as her relationship with powerful men, made her a complex and somewhat misunderstood figure. On the evening of August 4th, 1962, shortly before her death, she made several phone calls. One of the most famous calls was to her friend and fellow actor Peter Lawford. Lawford was married to Patricia Kennedy, the sister of John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy. According to Lawford, Monroe was emotional and sounded disoriented during the conversation. Lawford later claimed that she said goodbye with the words, "Say goodbye to the president, and say goodbye to yourself, because you're a nice guy." Many interpreted that sentence as a possible farewell message or as an indication of a suicide attempt. In addition to Lawford, Monroe also reportedly spoke on the phone to Ralph Gleason, her psychiatrist, as well as Joe DiMaggio Jr., the son of her ex-husband Joe DiMaggio, that same evening. But there's no obvious sign of imminent danger and no suicide intent during these conversations. She was found dead in her bedroom at her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles, early morning of August 5th, 1962. The housekeeper, Eunice Murray, discovered her lifeless body in her bed. Her reported she had been concerned because Monroe's bedroom light had been on during the night and she didn't respond to knocking. So she called Monroe's psychiatrist, Dr. Greenson, and who arrived at the scene at about 3 in the morning and broke down the bedroom's glass door to get to Monroe. He found Monroe motionless and immediately notified a doctor who confirmed the death. Monroe was found dead, naked in her bed with a telephone receiver in her hand and an empty bottle of barbiturates on the nightstand. Official cause of death was acute barbiturate poisoning, classified as possible suicide. Well, the death of Marilyn Monroe was accompanied from the beginning by speculation, raising the question of whether evidence of personal items being removed from the crime scene possibly aiding a cover-up. There's a number of reports and conspiracy theories claiming the evidence was tampered with or removed. One of the most important items to disappear was actually her personal diary. Housekeeper Eunice Murray initially stated she found Monroe about 3 in the morning, but she later changed her story and said she discovered Monroe earlier, which some see as an indication the scene may have been doctored before the death was officially announced. And one of the most pertinent theories claims that Monroe may have possessed sensitive information that disappeared after her death. Some claim pages from her diary or notes were removed before the police got to the scene. It's speculated these documents may have contained information about her affair with the Kennedys or other political secrets, because she was known to indulge in a lot of pillow talk. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow and talk about more stories that are strange and unusual. Until then, Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.